Hi, welcome back to another episode of Ask Lattice, the video series where you are going to be able to ask us any questions and we'll try and answer it as best as we can.
So this week we threw out a load of questions to the Facebook community page all about general training principles. So it's a really broad-ranging topic which everyone was welcome to just dive into. So you ready for the questions, Ollie?
I think so.
Okay, question 1 is from Steve Latif, and he said, I started climbing at 40 and I'm now 57 years old, and he wonders whether the perceived wisdom of not climbing as a kid, so basically in your younger years, means that you're forever doomed at a 5'9", HVS 6A level. Is it a big problem if you're not climbing as a kid?
Oh, that's a good question, that. Well, I think climbing is probably one of the few sports where it's really nice that you see in the media that the achievements at the top end are always being reported, but I think they're also dependent on the younger and older age groups as well. 8A NU is a really good example of that, where you'll see someone who's climbing 9B is reported at sort of a normal adult age, like in their 20s and 30s, but then you'll also get reports of the really youngest juniors and then some of the older climbers that have not been climbing quite as long. And I think some of these stories are really good examples that you can perform at a really high standard, even if you started climbing quite late and if you're an older climber as well. So first of all, I'd go and say have a look at some of those because they're really inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the premise of not being able to progress beyond that 5'9", even 5'10" standard if you've started coming to climbing late, even if you're in your 50s, I think is just so far away from the truth. And I'm really confident that any climber who applies themselves consistently to some kind of forward progression, however they might do that, whether that's working on their physical attributes, their technical skills, their strategy, or their mental game, can definitely improve into their 50s. And I think limiting and stopping the standard at 5'9" or 5'10" is just so far from the mark that it's just, it's ridiculous. You go way above that.
Yeah. So we're not saying that you're going to be the first person to climb 9C+, but what we're saying is that there isn't a ceiling that's set by your age or your starting position that's lower down in the grades. You can still make improvements as long as you keep climbing.
Okay, so next question. This is from Ollie Eldridge, and he's asked, how much does a long break in climbing, so going away on holiday or something like that, how much does that affect your route climbing fitness? And he's going away for 7 weeks. So this is quite a long period of time. Is that going to have a big effect?
I think it depends on what you're doing a little bit, but I'll probably give you another example which is really easy to sort of show this as an example. So Tom's got a much bigger endurance base than I have. He's naturally a more endurance-based athlete and can get fitness up and down really quickly. And I think you said it takes you about 2 weeks to get your power endurance back up to max?
Maybe not to max, but I'd say I have a very quick change in it. So I get momentum quickly. Reaching my true potential takes a little longer.
So for myself, I need a really big building period to get to a peak performance and to maintain fitness. Even though I've done a lot of base mileage over the years now, and I've built up my fitness to a higher standard than it ever used to be, it still takes me quite a long time. So I think as this example of having a very, very high base that's quite naturally there and someone who doesn't, 7 weeks does affect me quite a lot. However, it's coming back much, much quicker these days the more mileage I've done in the past. Whilst I think 7 weeks off for Tom, even though his standard is really high to begin with, I think you'll probably get it back a fair bit quicker.
Yeah, it will come back relatively quickly for me. And in terms of looking at the very basic physiology of what occurs in this scenario is that when you look at route climbing fitness, there's part of that fitness comes from structural change that occurs in the body, in the muscles. So those are things like changing the blood supply network and the actual physiology, the structure of the muscle. And then secondly is there's changes in the chemical properties and the enzyme activity and the biochemistry of the muscle. And those changes occur or change much quicker. So you have a detraining effect that occurs quite quickly in these biochemical elements of performance. But the structural changes in terms of, the blood supply network, that foundation and that network that's built up and takes lots of time to develop also stays for a really long time. So in some ways, the answer will be over a 7-week period is twofold. Is the structural changes won't change much and you won't see much effect in those. So you will see a base that will stay, but the biochemical changes, yes, you'll see a significant effect.
Another example that might make you feel a little bit better about having this time off and not worry too much is if you imagine all of the athletes that work on an annual basis, football players, rugby players, a lot of team sports, they'll usually have a down period after their peak performance of at least sort of 4 weeks. And most of them will do quite a big cessation of training compared to normal. And that's something they do every year because they know it's good for them long term. So this necessarily isn't a bad thing. And as long as you come back gradually, I'm sure you'll get it back really quick.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Ollie. And perhaps the last thing that I'll leave you with is that if you want to make some kind of attempt at keeping some of the training improvements or gains that you'd had before this trip and 7 weeks away, probably the most effective way that I would look at trying to keep and maintain anything would be to take a portable fingerboard away on that trip. And I know you've said that you are away for, a full period of time, but even a small portable fingerboard is still something to be able to do some small amount of training on, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so next question is from Chris Christensen. And he said, if you're both a boulderer and a sport climber, how much do you need to maintain strength? So if you're doing a sport climbing season and that's your main focus, are you going to lose lots of the strength improvements in your bouldering?
Yeah, I think that's something we get asked quite a lot. My first answer is always, where are you sport climbing? I think any of those who climb in the Peak District quite a lot will probably giggle to themselves a little bit because effectively it's bouldering on a rope. And I probably feel stronger at bouldering after a sport climbing season in the Peak District. So it depends on the type of sport climbing to begin with. If we use Orleana maybe, a 50 metre Enduro Fest as an example of this, as an extreme example, and let's base it off that because I think that's probably the worst case scenario you'll have of losing strength.
Yeah, it's in this kind of scenario is I'd say that, and I do a lot of trad climbing as well, so I know this situation. I really kind of have experienced it a lot over the years, is that I will be looking to drop because I want to still perform outside, so I can't be too fatigued, I will drop the volume that I'm doing in my training by at least 75%, so more than I would in a taper week. And then in terms of the really intense work I would do, such as fingerboarding or bouldering, I'll drop that by at least 50%. So if I was training 4 days a week previously and doing a lot of volume for that, if I'm just trying to create some kind of basic maintenance of bouldering, strength recruitment in the background, I'll be doing 2 short sessions a week. And I find for a good 6 to 8 weeks, that's just enough to keep that power and strength topped up where it feels close to maximum. Although admittedly, over time, you then have this effect where actually you start to detrain a bit and it's very, very hard to prevent that.
And if you spend time with any of the elite sport climbers that spend time at these longer cliffs in Spain, you'll often see that on their training days, they'll be out projecting, trying their really long routes, and then they'll have a rest day, and then they'll be working just maximum strength and power, trying to recruit as much as possible, and then resting before they try and sport climb again. So all of their training time is going to be focused on trying to maintain that strength. But like Tom said, it's always a bit of a fighting battle of recovery versus endurance versus strength. So you've got to think, I'm prioritizing my sport performance, and it's going to go down, so just build up the strength gradually before the boulder season begins.
Okay, so next question is from John James, and he's asked, do we have any top training tips for slab climbing? This is a good question, actually. I like this one, and I don't think we've ever been asked it before.
So top tips for slab climbing.
How many slabs do you do, Ollie?
I am okay at certain types of slabs because I would say I have quite strong legs compared to most climbers, or big legs. My flexibility is something to be desired though. So one thing, flexibility is definitely the way forward. If you can move your foot onto the next hold without breaking that centre of gravity, then that's fantastic. And if you watch any of the really good slab climbers, they're really good at that. Secondly, for me, would always be having good leg strength. If you watch a lot of the good slab climbers, they won't be the people that are able just to fly around in roof climbing, because they'll have nice strong quads in terms of being able to do those high step ups and one-legged squats.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is important to reflect on top of what Ollie says about these high steps and flexibility, is in slab climbers, I've seen a lot of good climbers who potentially could handle hard slab climbing, but they have really, really inflexible ankles, and it means they're not able to drop their heels low enough on really flat holds, whether it's flat volumes or smeary holds. A note to point on that is that occasionally it's not actually the absolute level of range of mobility you have and the flexibility, and it's actually down to the shoe as well. So really take a careful check on whether you have a shoe that's supple enough and soft enough in that midsole that you can really bring that heel low, because if you have a really tight downturn shoe, you won't even feel like you've got flexibility in the ankle. So do watch out for that.
But I would say, and I think hopefully Tom will agree with this, number one tip for training for slab climbing is spending time becoming more brave at actually completing the movements. I'm going to sort of compare this to being a trad climber. You can be as fit as you want, but if you're absolutely terrified above your gear, you're always going to be over gripping and you'll be getting pumped out or not complete the moves in a relaxed way. Slab climbing, it can be one of those things where you become quite nervous if you're standing on really insecure feet or you've got insecure hands. If you're comfortable with that, you'll relax onto it and use the most out of your lower body. If you're not comfortable, or you've not practiced that at all and you're not very good at it, and you've not got much courage in that position, then you're always going to be much tighter, trying to pull harder, and you'll never be as good at it. So be willing to fall, spend time on it, and just get used to those positions where it doesn't feel very comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. And I've climbed with some of the very best slab climbers in the world. And if you ask those climbers or you watch what they're doing on a weekly activity, they are not there at home doing some kind of specific, calf raises or squats or pistol squats trying to get good at slab climbing. What are they doing? They're going slab climbing regularly. They spent 5, 10, 15, 20 years doing it, and they work all the way up through the grades, and they do lots and lots of climbing outdoors. And I think the reality is at the moment, the training aspect applied specifically to slab climbing may not actually be the secret to achieving the top standards in it. It's still something that you can achieve by doing a lot of that activity. And I kind of hate always giving that answer of, well, just get good at climbing by going climbing. But in this case, at the current standards of slab climbing, I don't see that being limited by training, because I've climbed with and been in really close proximity to some of the best slab climbers, and I don't see them doing that activity.
So we've just built a new slab at the Lattice lockup where we train, and I think it's going to be the most popular part of the wall at the moment. Luckily, it's nice and clean at the moment, but I'm sure there's going to be loads of rubber marks down it in the next couple of weeks, because we're all psyched to spend a lot of time on there and start pushing each other on slabs.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You're going to burn me off though.
Maybe.
So that's all the questions that we have for today, and we're going to take a break, and further questions will be answered in the next episode.
Just make sure to keep going on the Facebook discussion group so you can keep in touch with everything that we're doing on there, asking questions. Follow us on Instagram, and remember to click and subscribe to the YouTube channel.